grow remote from the sidelines through my years of working with Shopify. But I just remember having conversations with Tracy way back in the day, and to see how much it's grown since then. Over 20,000 people, I think, are on the LinkedIn page. So it's really incredible, and a testament to all the hard work that the team is doing behind the scenes. So with that, another big shout out and thanks to Erica, Victoria, and Donald for all their work organizing this and kind of working in the background to make sure that it goes smoothly today. So I guess what we'll be covering today, Donald, if we move to the next slide, kind of going quick for you here, is just, first of all, a bit about me, why I'm talking, and maybe why you want to listen. I'll try not to bore you too much with some details on that, and then we'll get stuck into the good stuff. So really, you can look at the day as, I guess, a foundation of what a good job application should look like, some of the basics that you can cover to make sure that you're in the top 20% of applicants. I think we've all been there where we've seen, a lot of job applications open up and there's 200, 300 applicants. If you do the basics right, you can get into the top half and even the top 20% pretty easily by following some of these tips and tricks. So hopefully it's enjoyable, hopefully it's useful, and we'll get started. So before we dive into the important stuff, really quickly about myself. My name is Luke. I'm the founder of Careers with Luke, a bespoke recruitment and career services agency. I have about a decade experience in the tech and talent space. Most of that time has been with a company called Shopify, which I'm sure a lot of you know or familiar with. So I was actually one of the first 20 people that was hired in Ireland for Shopify about 8 years ago. Worked for a year remotely in customer support, and then pivoted into the TA team, or the recruitment team, where I spent the next 7 years or so. Mostly remote, so worked remotely across Ireland, New Zealand, Germany, and Canada, hiring for roles in all of those locations and more, and really got to experience what, I guess, good remote work looks like and how it can change communities and lives as well. So we'll maybe touch on that a bit, but mostly on the job search stuff. I won't badger on too much about the link, but my link tree is there if anyone is interested in free resources, free newsletters, or any other help and guidance. You can also find my link to my personal LinkedIn and my company LinkedIn page there too. So a quick question for the group today. I'd love to get a sense on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy everyone is with their current CV, resume, that kind of thing. So I'll take a look at the chat there and just see what type of answers we have. So 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident. Okay, 3. Hopefully we can improve that, Nora, after today. 6, 7, okay. Awesome. Okay. So a good mixture there. I think what a lot of people find with their resume or with their CV is it's very overwhelming, right? You might have a lot of experience that you're trying to summarize onto one page. You might feel like you have a lot of different experiences and you're trying to tailor it to one role, or capture a lot of different employers' potentially interest with one CV. So a couple of things to start us off. Your CV doesn't have to be one page. I think that's the biggest thing that I've found working with clients, is a lot of people think, I need to ram everything into one page. That might have been true when we had paper CVs for the most part, but because it's all digital now, it's really 2-3 pages is fine. I've even seen some resumes that are 4 pages, 5 pages. That might be a bit too long for most people, but just to know that, that you can do that as well. If your resume is 2-3 pages long, though, make sure the first page is super relevant to, the role. So as a recruiter, generally you're looking for kind of main things, main responsibilities, or kind of main requirements for the role. And most recruiters spend maybe 10-15 seconds at max looking at your first resume. So you need to make sure that on that first page are the key areas of your experience that match with the role. So the basics in terms of getting things right, simple, clean layout is usually best. Good spelling, good grammar, bullet points and using white space where possible, not having big, long paragraphs it is probably best, because again, it's like short, 10 seconds. What are your highlights? Great. Then I can look into more there. Put most relevant experience, like I said, on the first page, and then try and match your CV against the role requirements too, right? So that's when people are talking about customizing their resumes or customizing their CV. That's what they mean. It means looking at the requirements of the role you're applying for and trying to make sure that through your bullet points of experience or summary qualifications, you're kind of matching with what that experience is. For cover letters, it's pretty straightforward, right? You want to keep it short and sweet, so most postings don't require a cover letter now. I always say a good one can help, but a bad one can really hurt you. So in terms of basics, same stuff, spelling, grammar, make sure that's all good. Make sure the company is the right company and the role is the right role. You'd be surprised how many people applied for Shopify, noting Spotify as the company they were applying for. It was an internal joke. It happened that much. So just make sure you're covering the basics there. And ultimately, what you're trying to answer is why you're interested in the company, why you're interested in the role, and why you're a good match. So we'll walk through or just look at a couple of examples in the next couple of slides. The first one is a CV, and then the next one will be a cover letter. But there are two CVs here, and I just wanted to highlight some kind of main things. Now, I know it's a bit hard to see on a slide like this, but the main things to draw your attention to. Well, let me ask first, of those two CVs, the one on the left and one on the right, which one do you think is the more appealing one or the better one? You can answer in the chat there. Yeah, for sure. I kind of buried the lead there, but good stuff. We're all on the same page. So basically, you can see the one on the right, clear layout, lots of consistent headings, consistent grammar, consistent text size. You also have at the very top the contact details, right? And so many people leave off contact details because they think that I've applied through an ATS system, it's going to capture all of my details anyway. It's best to have super clear on the top of your page, your name, your location, if you want to include that. It's personal preference, phone number, email address, and a LinkedIn URL if possible too. I like to include an objective or a summary at the very top. This is your chance to hook the recruiter right away as well. I can share this template on the right too with folks. Just feel free to reach out to myself or Erica or Donal, and we'll send that over to you. But an objective or summary really helps capture the recruiter's attention. And then the summary of qualifications too is a really good piece to add. There was a question on, tailoring your resume or creating a resume to appeal to a broad set of employers. I think the qualifications piece is going to be the key area there. And the other side of it is not to try and tailor to everybody, but to have specific target roles or industries that you target to, and then you can summarize your relevant qualifications in that space. And then, again, the company and experience section, super clean, bullet points where needed, consistent font size, good spelling and grammar too. So bit of a contrast there, but you'll see how the right one really stands out. And if you're a recruiter and you only have 6 or 10 seconds to make a decision, you can see how that one on the right would make it easier and make it more appealing. The next one is just a sample cover letter. Again, I'll share this afterwards too. It's nothing major, nothing groundbreaking, but it's simple, gets to the point, and kind of highlights the main things we talked about, right? So your interest in the position and the company, why it aligns with your skills, outlining a couple of skills that you have, and then just reinforcing your interest in the role. A lot of people feel like they need to match every single requirement and think if they're missing one, that the cover letter is a good place to bring it up. The cover letter should be your kind of pitch as to why you're a great fit. Don't mention if there was a question on, I don't have X amount of years experience in one area, so should I call that out in the cover letter? That's not your job to call it out. Your job is to put your best foot forward and make sure that you're showcasing the skills that are relevant to the role. If you do start going down that path, well, I don't have experience A, but I have experience B, and I know you said experience C, but I actually only have experience D. It's just making it super easy to be screened out. Because if you think from a recruiter perspective, you're going through hundreds of applications. If you're reading a cover letter that someone isn't a match, it makes it pretty easy to screen out, right? Harsh, but it's kind of true when you're going through that many applications as well. So we can move on from cover letters unless there was any questions we didn't quite get to. We'll have time at the end for questions too. Okay, so LinkedIn. How many people on the chat today have a LinkedIn profile? Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so LinkedIn is a great place for you to network. It's also a great place to find job opportunities. There's a lot of roles posted there. Some LinkedIn stats, just to give you a sense of it, there are 750 million users in LinkedIn worldwide, with about 260 million monthly users. There's 57 million companies listed on LinkedIn, and there are about 15 million open job postings, right? So it's a huge, huge area where you can find jobs, connect with companies, and connect with people you know, or connect with people in companies that you like to get a better sense of things. Can be super intimidating, I know, but it boils down to your profile picture, your profile headline, your summary, experience, and education. So it's very similar to like a virtual CV. There are a few different things to look out for, but ultimately it's a great thing to have to attract interest from recruiters as well, who are searching LinkedIn every day to find relevant applicants or relevant profiles to fill the jobs that they're looking to fill. So we'll go through each of those elements now. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but gives you a sense of things. Okay, great. So first is your profile picture. So it might seem like a simple thing, but adding a profile picture indicates to recruiters that you're active, at least somewhat active on the platform, and they're more willing to reach out to you. Should be a headshot where possible, avoid kind of group photos, and it should be somewhat professional. So maybe don't have picture of a night out when you're drinking a few pints with your friends. More business professional, depending on the industry that you're in, of course. You don't need to spend a load of money to get a professional headshot. Fun fact, that is the selfie I took in my car. I put a grayscale on it and it looks fine, right? So don't be spending loads of money, especially if you're just starting out. If you want to and you need to do it for other reasons, great, like have at it, but you don't need to spend or invest a ton of money to get a professional photographer to take a business headshot. You can do that yourself. And there's also some AI tools as well out there that you can look into that will kind of generate it for you, which is pretty cool too. But basically, step one, add a profile picture, make sure it's yourself and make sure you're looking somewhat professional in it. Now, the next thing is the headline. So the headline goes directly under your profile picture when you show up on LinkedIn searches and on your profile directly. Max character length is like 220 characters, right? So short and sweet. It's a way to summarize your expertise or professional goals. And it's probably best, I find, to use keywords and job titles versus paragraphs. On the next slide, you'll see my one. It's not perfect, but you get a sense of what I mean when I'm emphasizing keywords. So you see there, talent acquisition, career mentoring, Shopify alumni, and writing, right? So there are kind of four key areas that I use to network and I use in my day-to-day kind of business. I will show up on searches if a recruiter is looking for a talent acquisition specialist, for example. I will show up higher on the rankings because I have it in my headline. Similarly, if you're a front-end engineer or you're a customer success specialist, if you add those keywords into your headline, it's going to help you show up more often and show up higher in recruiter searches as well. Okay, great. So the next is your summary. So your summary is a bit longer than your headline. It goes at the top. It's kind of like an executive summary of a regular CV or regular resume, but it's a chance basically to put your best foot forward for potential recruiters considering your profile. Again, it's all about being as concise as possible, using bullet points and sharing your career highlights, successes, and goals. If you have a role or career in mind, research keywords that I use, work backwards, right? If you know that you're really looking into sales roles, for example, have a look at a few job postings for roles that you're interested in, jot down the requirements and different words that pop up every now and again, and then just add them or try and add them in some way to your profile as well. I like to use bullet points here for the summary as well. You don't have to if you prefer to kind of use paragraphs, but I think bullet points really allow you to highlight a summary of your experience really well. Again, super quick, super easy, add some keywords and you're kind of halfway there. So you'll see on the next slide, just my own summary. So kind of what I'm doing right now. So helping people at Careers with Luke, recruiting exec talent with Exemplify Talent, and doing a bit of writing on the side at my own website. And then you see listed very clearly are my highlights. So anyone looking at that profile will be able to tell pretty quickly where my areas of expertise are, where my areas of interest are, and if I'm a match for what they're looking for from the role as well. Okay. Now, the next piece is kind of the bread and butter, I would say, of your LinkedIn profile. It's the experience section. So this is the companies you worked on, the roles you've worked in, and filling that out, right? So it's a chance to tell your story and let recruiters know what the focus was in each role. One of the common kind of errors or mistakes that I see people with LinkedIn profiles make is they just add the company in the title and they don't give any description underneath it. It hurts you in two ways, right? So it lessens the amount of keywords that you have on your profile. So again, when it comes to recruiter searches or rankings, you're going to be a bit lower down on the list because you don't have as many of those keywords showing up. But two, you're reliant a lot on the recruiter's knowledge of the company, the role, or the industry to kind of read between the lines on what you were doing. Whereas if you can spell it out with your experience, adding a bit more context to each posting or each job, it will really help the recruiter make that decision quicker. And hopefully contact you more when they have an opportunity that matches with what you've done in the past and what you're looking to do as well. I'm like a broken record, but bullet points are great. Any quantifiable experience you have, so like any data points you have potentially, or any big projects that you were involved in that you can speak to, like add all of those in. They're all really interesting and kind of useful data points and just strengthen your profile overall. And you can also include relevant skills at the bottom too. So there's a section on LinkedIn where you can call out specific skills. I think it's about 5 skills per job or per role. So make sure you're matching each role with relevant skills. Again, thinking of the keywords and kind of key areas for each job you're looking to apply for as well. So on the next slide, you'll see just again an example from my profile of the different areas. So in the blue underlined are data points that I've added in to kind of strengthen some of that experience. So the team size of the teams that I led before, the percentage increase of projects I was involved with, and just overall kind of solidifying some of that experience or some of the kind of things I'm talking about on the profile. Green are keywords that have come from, say, talent acquisition job postings that I've added into the profile too. These will be different depending on the role you're applying for, of course, but this is just an example of how to add them into a profile. That's a very natural, organic way as well. So you'll see there on the green, like the ATS we're talking about, process effectiveness, full cycle recruitment. Those are keywords for talent acquisition postings that I've added in there too. And then in red are kind of some of the technologies or tooling that I would use on a day-to-day basis as a recruiter. So you've got your things like Gem and GoodTime, which are very much recruitment tools. But if you were in the customer support space, or potentially you were in an administration role, things like Microsoft Word or Excel, or things like that, Google Slides, Slack potentially as well, they're all kind of good things to call out. And especially if you're looking for a remote role, these type of things are really cool to highlight as well, because it showcases that you're able to work, in a remote environment, leveraging tools and technology. Things like Slack, Zoom, Google Meet, like those are all video tools that are used, or kind of messaging tools that are used in a remote environment as well. So those would be really useful to highlight if you have any experience. If you're part of the Grow Remote Slack community, definitely something to highlight there as well, right? So it kind of highlights the remote work side of things, but it also highlights that you're able to use the tooling and technology that some companies use in a remote aspect as well. And then finally, at the bottom there, you'll see in yellow, it's kind of hard to see, but the skills that I've listed for that relevant posting. Again, they'll differ depending on your own experience and your own role, but just an example there. Okay. And then the kind of one of the final sections is education. So it gives you a chance to highlight any of your educational background, including degrees or diplomas or relevant certifications, right? So this, again, is another area where if you're looking to pivot into remote work, or you've worked in kind of that tech space or remote work already, you can highlight some of the tooling you've used in your courses or in your studies that might be relevant to remote work too, right? So whether it's when I was in NUIG, we used a tool called Blackboard for the submission of applications or projects and stuff. Something like that you could add in just shows, again, that you're reinforcing that you were able to utilize that technology, utilize different tooling. Another great example are Grow Remote's courses on remote work ready and leading remote teams. You could add those in here and be a really great way to highlight that someone is ready for remote work, right? Especially if you're a bit worried that your experience is all in office and that you're not sure if it shows up well in your profile. Adding something like that would really help kind of showcase that you do have the skills and expertise ready to pivot into the remote side of things as well. And on the next slide, you'll just see one of mine. So from my own experience, I've summarized a lot in terms of the areas of study to highlight different keywords that might be useful. And then keywords, again, underlined in green, a lot of it would be tooling or different programming languages I would have used as well. So this doesn't help me too much in my career as a talent acquisition specialist, but if I was going into something like front-end development or full stack development, things like JavaScript, HTML, PHP, XML, all that kind of stuff would be useful keywords if they were technologies used in roles that I was looking for. So even though I don't have that much experience in my actual job experience, I still show up sometimes in different searches because I have them listed in my educational experience, right? So no matter what section of LinkedIn you're looking at, really try and think about the keywords, the kind of key experiences and technologies that you've used, and just continue to emphasize that throughout your process, throughout your profile. Okay. Now we're on to networking. So I just want to get a sense of how many people have used their network to help find jobs or connect with people in different companies. Awesome. Yeah. Okay, great. So look, networking is a scary word sometimes, right? We can kind of look at it as a sort of very challenging thing to do. The great thing about LinkedIn is that you can connect with people pretty easily. But the first thing to look at is everyone has a network, right? You have family, friends, colleagues, classmates. You have a network somewhere, and it's just about kind of taking that first step to reach out for help a lot of times or advice. So networking can help learn more about specific roles. So if you find people in your network or connect with people who are in a role in a company that you're applying for, or in a similar role to a role you're applying for somewhere else, you can have a great conversation with them around what it's like, what the best things about the role are, what the worst things are, and they can help you prepare for interviews. They can also help connect you with jobs that maybe haven't been posted yet, or hiring managers that are looking to hire as well. It can increase your interview chances because lots of companies have referral networks. So if you reach out and build a network within a specific space, industry, or company, you're more likely to pick up a referral potentially, and that will put you to the top of the list of any applicant pool as well, for the most part as well. So I just wanted to share a few sample networking messages that I've used in the past for different aspects. Again, there's nothing groundbreaking here. Hopefully it takes some of the fear away, but you can, if you have an email or a LinkedIn profile, even Facebook or Twitter, you can use some of these messages or base some of your messages off these, and hopefully make those connections. I think one really interesting one here is the hiring manager follow-up. So if you apply for a role and a hiring manager is listed, you can find the hiring manager on LinkedIn and send them a quick connection request with that message there. And 9 times out of 10, you might not hear back, but the one time you do, it can really help you kind of in your interview process and increase the chances of being called for an interview as well. Recruiters generally have about a 33% response rate from any reach outs that they do. So, that's not very high if you think about it, right? So if you are reaching out to a lot of people and you're not hearing back, don't be disheartened. It happens to everybody. I'm not sure of the percentages of salespeople. Maybe it's a bit higher, maybe it's roughly the same. But you just got to keep going, and don't take it personally if you don't hear back. You can tweak your messaging and tweak kind of your approach, but just keep at it and you'll find the benefit of it in the long run. Networking is a long game play, right? So the more you do, it's like kind of planting seeds in the garden. You might not see the kind of flowers sprout up straight away, but if you keep doing it, kind of keep nurturing your network, eventually you're going to find that it's going to bring you benefits in the long run. Okay, great. So, interviews. Hands up who loves interviews. I'm guessing no one really enjoys interviews. Look, interviews are nerve-wracking at the best of times, right? And especially with the added pressure of, needing a job or needing a new role or really wanting a role. It can be super nerve-wracking and super intimidating. I'm going to talk through some of the basics here. So they're not an extensive guide for sure, but some of the basics that you can do to help give yourself a bit of confidence, kind of moving into the interview stage, and hopefully just better equipped to answer some of the questions as well. So we're going to go through some research and prep, some really quick remote interviewing tips, and then some answering techniques as well. And then we're going to finish off with some free interview tools that you can use to prep as well. Okay, great. So the first thing I do, and the first thing I'd advise anyone to do going into any sort of interview, is look at these 3 key areas, right? So the company values and mission, the product and service the company provides, and the role and responsibilities the job role and responsibilities, right? So the reason you need to have these, understand these or kind of prep these, is you need to tell your story about why you are a great fit for the role and why you're interested in the role ultimately, right? So lots of people can say, oh, I really need a job, or I really want this job because it pays well. That might be the case. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But employers love to be buttered up a bit and be told the story as to why their company is the best company, or why their product or their mission is the best mission, right? So you need to find a connection between why you're interested in this role or why you're interested in this company. And the best way to do that is through the mission statement or through the values. So you'll find that on the company page or the career page for the most part. And it will be something that they will be looking out for in each stage of the interview process, right? If a company spends time to develop its mission and values, you can be sure that they're assessing that in some form or fashion throughout the interviews, or at least they're discussing it internally with any candidate that they're looking to bring in. Do they live up to the values of the company, right? So the more you can highlight that you're aligned with those values or that they appeal to you in some way, the better you're going to be placed when kind of you're in that process. From a product or service standpoint, it's just kind of basic research of understanding what the company does, who its customers are, and what gap it fills in the market. Again, this will help you throughout the process because you'll be able to look at your answers through that lens and understand a bit more maybe where their questions are coming from and what kind of answers they're looking to get as well. So the basics of understanding the product and understanding who buys it are probably all you need to kind of start off here. And then as you get further in, asking more questions to interviewers and just doing a bit more research, you'll be able to build on that foundation. And then finally, roles and responsibilities. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a resume or I've kind of talked to somebody on the phone who hasn't a clue what role they've applied for or hasn't a clue, what basic requirements there are for the role. So even if you do the bare minimum of looking at the requirements and understand how your experience matches to each of those requirements, you're going to be in the top 20% of candidates that people speak to. I know that's hard to believe when the market is so competitive, but it's true, right? So if you make sure that your experience is aligned and kind of your CV is kind of matches with what they're looking for, and you have prepped answers of why you can do each of the responsibilities listed out, you're halfway home, right? Then it's just a matter of the interview process and sort of practice, and hopefully it goes well. But again, set yourself up for success by doing some of these prep stuff. Now, remote interviews can be nerve-wracking as well, and they can be very different if you haven't done many before. So on the next slide, we'll just talk through some of the basics there as well. Or I'll talk through it and you can watch the lovely GIF of this guy waving at the camera. So few really quick, really easy remote interview techniques, right? So first of all, to feel comfortable, it's advised you test your tech beforehand. Donal and Erica and I know this. We tested my tech about 30 minutes before this call and everything broke on me. So, it's important that you take that time ahead of it to make sure your camera works, your microphone works okay. Some companies use different technologies and it can mess with your microphone. So just make sure you're doing that basic prep and practice and testing, right? The next is to frame your shot. I'm kind of framed okay here. Erica and Donal are professionals at this. They're perfectly framed. But I can't tell you the amount of people that I'm looking at their forehead or I'm looking up their nose when I'm talking to them on an interview, right? So just be aware of how you're framed in your video, ideally in the middle, but try not to have your camera pointing straight up your nose or have your head out of shot, right? Simple stuff, but when you're in the process and you're kind of nervous in the interview, you can't forget this because you're worried about answering the questions, right? So just take a breath and make sure that you're framed correctly. Don't be in the dark is a good one too. So this isn't that you can control the weather outside, obviously, but make sure that you have good lighting, that you're visible. Either get a spotlight or a lamp on your desk is a good way around this, especially if you're interviewing early in the morning or late at night. It just helps make sure that the person on the other side can connect with you, and it's kind of a face-to-face interaction as opposed to talking with a shadow, which makes it harder. It's kind of an unconscious bias from an interview perspective. If they can't connect with you and kind of see your face, it makes it more difficult to build that rapport as well. Finding a quiet place is important too, ideally with a door so you can close it, especially if you're screaming kids or pets running around or something like that, right? as if you can get into a safe space, a quiet space where you can just focus on the interview and not have to worry about the distractions that might be happening, you're going to perform much better. And that kind of leads me to the final point on this, which is don't worry if someone bursts into the room like a kid crying or your dog kind of bursts in chewing a toy or something, right? It's the reality of remote work. We've all been there. I can guarantee you, if someone is interviewing you from a remote standpoint too, they know exactly what you're going for. So don't feel the need to ignore it or rush back into the interview. Take a pause, ask to take a short break, deal with whatever the interruption is, take a breath and come back, right? It's something that everybody deals with on a day-to-day basis. Life gets in the way sometimes. So don't be too stressed if something like that happens. Just take your time, take a breath, and then hopefully continue with the interview. And if you need to postpone it, right? Like there's a human element here. Interviewing is tough, especially if there's people interrupting or anything like that. So just take that breath and take that time. Okay. So now we're going to go into 2 answer techniques that are really simple. I know this has been a lot of information, so I want to be conscious of not overloading everybody today, but 2 answer techniques I find useful when you're in an interview situation to stop you from, rambling too much. Or I know when I get nervous, I ramble. You're probably seeing that today a bit as well when I'm answering these questions. But these 2 techniques really help you distill your experience into a form that's easy to follow for your interviewer, right? So the first one's called the Carl method. It's context, action, result, and learning. So ultimately, what you're going to do is when you're asked the question, especially if you're asked one of these tell me a time when questions, it's a good way to answer this, right? So the first part is giving a bit of background information or context on the situation. So I was we were trying to hire 100 people in 6 weeks, and it was really tough because we only had 3 recruiters, right? So that's an example of setting the scene and understanding why it was challenging. Then the next step is to describe the specific actions you took. So in that situation, I did X, Y, and Z to help move forward. And this is why I did each of those things, right? So you're talking through your process, but you're also highlighting kind of things that you did, flexing your skills or experience as you do that too. And then the results. So I did A, B, C, and X, Y, Z happened, the outcomes of your actions, and then the learning that comes at the end of that too. So once you talk through the context, what you did, what happened, then you talk through what you learned from the experience and how you kind of gain more knowledge or became better because of the experience, right? So I probably overcomplicated that a bit, but you're looking at context, action, result, and learning, right? Is a good way to frame those. The next one is very similar, but again, follows a similar pattern, right? So it's called the STAR method. It's situation, task, action, and result. And again, for those type of tell me a time when, or describe a time you did this, or you showcase this skill, or this happened, and how you kind of, dealt with it. The STAR method is another great way of doing it. So it's very similar to the CARA method, but you're focused more so on the results as opposed to the learnings. So the CARA method is good if the outcomes weren't, super tangible. If you couldn't say, yeah, we increased sales by 100% at the end. So you didn't have that kind of North Star focal point at the end of your example. The STAR method is great if you have a kind of a concrete example of how that impacted things at the end. So situation, again, context or scenario where you face the challenge, the task, what you needed to do, or what the situation required, the action, what you took, kind of how you navigated that task, and kind of how you led towards a result, and then the result at the end of it too. These are a lot more difficult to talk through like this than they are actually to put into action, and it's about practice, right? So if anyone needs a bit of help or wants to talk through any of that, I'm happy to kind of connect with people individually and talk through that as well. But CARL and STAR, if you just remember that and remember the acronyms, and have them in the back of your head when you're starting to answer a question, you're going to be a bit more kind of aligned and on the question, and just a bit more succinct in your answer too, which is going to help you. And then finally, just on the interview side of things, there are a couple of free tools out there. Interview Warm-Up by Google is a really interesting one that they just launched. It's actually an AI-powered tool. You can go in and collect or select from a list of different things. So they have product management, they have engineering, they have e-commerce, they have digital marketing, and it will provide you with a question where you answer either through speech or through text, and then the AI system will rate your answer and give you some feedback back. So it's a bit trippy the first time you use it, but a really interesting tool to experiment with. There's some other tools there, Pram, Zeti, InterviewBit. Depends on your location, how effective they are. One I didn't list there is actually one I'll follow up with afterwards. It's LinkedIn's version of Interview Warm-Up by Google, basically. So it's more of a text or a speech answering thing as well, but it's powered by AI and gives you real-time feedback on your answers too. So I'll add that in there once we share the slides. But there are some tools out there to help you prep. I think one of the key things as well is just practice with friends and family, right? Or kind of colleagues that you know, or kind of run questions by people you trust. Interviewing is tough because you only get better at it by doing it. And sometimes you can only do it when you're in the process, when you really need to perform, right? So the more comfortable you can get talking about yourself, whether that's with friends or family or through some of these tools, the better you're going to perform on the day and in the interview process. So, use these tools, check them out, but friends and family are always there to help support as well. And if you really need to, you can kind of connect with people through Grow Remote as well, or take some of the courses that they provide to help you navigate, especially the remote working side of things. Or feel free to reach out if you're struggling with anything in particular, and I can hop on a call, or we can kind of chat over Slack or LinkedIn as well if there's specific things you're struggling with. Okay. So now we're going to pivot to questions. I know there's a lot we already have, and I'm sure there's some more in the chat that's popped up. But any specific questions that we need to dive into?
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Luke. I'm just going to stop sharing and make sure that I can be seen as well. So we've gone through so much stuff, and there's brilliant questions coming through. Erica has been posting a lot of the information and resources that you have mentioned, Luke, yourself. So please do, everybody, have a look and see. There's links in there. There's loads of information. We will be sharing a lot of this as well alongside the video. And Luke mentioned sharing the slides with all those links and things. So everything should be available to you afterwards. So thank you so much. Very generous, Luke. Obviously, going through all this is really, really valuable stuff. I've been trying to consolidate a few questions, and one of the big ones I want to start with, and just to bear in mind, remind everybody, we'll be finished at 5. So we'll spend 10 minutes on these some of the key questions that came up, and we'll make sure everybody can head off and make the dinner or whatever it is they need to do. One of the big ones, Luke, that came up in the questions in the forum, but also today, was around a gap in the CV. So what if you don't have the qualifications on paper? You don't have exactly what they're looking for, but you do have a lot of experience. How do you get around that? Is it a write-off? Like, should you not even bother, or are there ways around it? What do you think?
You should definitely bother if it's a role that you think you'd be great at and you're interested in, right? I think it comes back to the layout of the CV, and I think that's where the summary, qualifications, and the executive summary is a really great way to bridge that gap. So ultimately, on the first page, as we talked about, you need to have your kind of key areas that you can offer to the role and that match the role. Now, if your experience is a 100% match with the role you're applying for, you kind of don't need that piece, because your experience will speak for itself. And on the first page, you'll have 2 or 3 roles that are super relevant. If your experience isn't as relevant, what you can do is pull the different aspects of each role that are most relevant to the role, summarize it at the top, and then only add the different pieces of each role that are most relevant when you're listing your jobs underneath, right? So you're not adding kind of all the irrelevant stuff you've done. You're really focusing in on the most relevant piece of information. You're adding the exec summary at the top as well, where you're calling out the areas that you can offer to, or the areas of expertise you offer to the role, and the summary qualification at the end, or at the top. So that
like
would be
headline? Is that like your sort of your headline skills or your headline experience? Is that what you want to bring attention to?
Yeah, so basically on the CV itself, you either can add an objective underneath your contact details or an executive summary, right? So if your objective is to call out that you're looking to pivot into a new industry, or that you're looking to leverage the experience you have in a different way, you can call that out. And then underneath that kind of headline or summary, you can add 5 or 6 bullet points that highlight your most relevant experience, even if they're from 20 years ago or 15 years ago, or they're from a role that you did voluntarily, right? You don't need to list them in the traditional way. You can add that block at the top that will catch the recruiter's attention. And then the kind of psychological side from a recruiter point of view is, you've already said, oh, actually, this person would be great based on these 5, 6 qualifications that they've shown me. So now they're looking at your experience in a more positive way, as opposed to if you just listed your experience, they might be a bit confused as to why you're applying for the role, right?
Yeah, and we had a question from a few people, but Nora a few minutes ago posted one around aiming towards a particular level or a particular role that maybe might seem contradictory or might seem a little strange compared to your experience, but what you've just said, and it goes for Nora's example, and also where you might perceive yourself as having a gap, you just point to the things that you do have and draw attention to that, and then everything else should follow, hopefully, in terms of the application and the conversation with the recruiter.
Yeah, and like we said before, we'll share a few templates as well for you to check out and like experiment with. We're also, the Contact Donal and Erica, we're doing a bit of help with CVs as well. So if you're really stuck, like reach out, we can definitely support there. But ultimately, getting a good kind of layout and emphasizing experience or specifics as opposed to your whole career is probably a way to go there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And again, you're very generous for sharing everything. So we'll pop in that email address if you want to reach out to us. It's community@growremote.ie, and then we can put you in touch with Luke or with whatever resource we can find for you. So thank you, Erica. There was another question that came up in the registration form as well around salary expectations. So this can be an awkward one. What do you do when maybe you have a question about the salary, or maybe they make a statement about the salary? How do you sort of get by?
Yeah. It's always a tricky one, right? Because in an ideal world, everyone would be open with, especially from a company standpoint or a recruiter standpoint. From a recruiter perspective, sometimes their hands are tied in terms of sharing that band. So that's the context from the other side of the curtain, I guess. If you're in a situation where they're really pushing for you to provide a range, which happens sometimes, right? There's a couple of things. So the first is preparation. So looking at similar roles and seeing if there any have a salary band listed, other jobs or the companies in a similar, I guess, of similar titles or similar kind of crafts. So that's the first thing. You can look on Glassdoor for the actual company themselves and the specific role you're interviewing for, and Glassdoor will provide a range. Pay Scale is another one that does that. And again, this is where your network can come in as well. If you know people in the role, or you know people that are in similar roles, kind of reaching out and asking them for advice and just getting a sense of, hey, what do you think entry level or this type of role should pay salary range rise? So that arms you with a bit of information when you're coming into the call. Obviously, you have your own number in the back of your head as well that you ideally want to get to, right? So all of that combined. The first thing to do is ask if there is a approved salary range on their side, right? So, hey, I'm like interested. I need to know a bit more about the company and the culture and the specifics of the role. But I'm curious if there's a approved range for this role already. And if they don't respond to that and they're really pushing at the initial stages, I would give a really broad range, starting at your kind of base number of what you'd need to say the minimum that you'd be happy with, add 5-10% onto that. That's the start of your range. And then you can stretch up to however high you want to stretch up. As you're going through the process, it might come up again. And as you learn more about the role, you'll be able to better match your experience with kind of where they're looking. And you can always change that range, right? But that's how I kind of come at it from that perspective. If you're feeling pressure to share a range, kind of turn the question back on them, do your research, turn the question back on them first. And then if they're really pushing, just give a pretty broad range. If it's later in the process, you can narrow down that range. You'll have a better understanding of what the expectations of the role are and whether your experience is like a really great match or maybe something you need to grow into, and you can adjust there. But that's probably how I'd handle that situation.
Amazing. That's great advice. From behind the curtain, like you said, you've been in this situation with loads and loads of different clients and stuff. So it's brilliant to get that. Very final question. I think it would be very relevant, especially with your expertise in remote recruitment, is around we've had a few questions. What if I, as an applicant, a candidate, I don't have technical experience, but I want to work remotely? Is that a barrier for me? And I know just from the various sessions and like this that we have done with Grow Remote, a lot of companies say, look, you don't need to be techie. You don't need to have worked remotely. You don't need to have tech experience. We will train you. What we're looking for are these skills, and often they're not necessarily technical. So what's your input?
Yeah, that's similar to my experience, right? So I spend a lot of time at Shopify hire for customer support roles and kind of commercial roles. So that it would be different if you're hiring for developer roles where they need specific technical skills to do the job base level, right? But for more of those roles that require the soft skills, it's about your communication and showcasing that you're able to adapt to that environment. So kind of goes back to what we were saying about listing some of the tooling or the technology that you've used, even if it seems small. Like if you've ever had a Google Hangout, or if you ever had a Zoom conversation, or have ever used Slack in any way, like calling out that you've used those tools can really help. And it just shows that you're able to navigate that environment. But in most cases, especially if it's one of those roles that's more soft skill based, like you can learn all of those things, but it's about being able to show that you're adaptable to that, right? So things like the Grow Remote courses and being involved in the Grow Remote community are great ways to kind of showcase that you're actually actively looking to engage in remote work and that you have kind of that community already, which would make it a less risky situation for an employer if they were being a bit weird about that you actually have that background as well.
Brilliant. Yeah, excellent. Really, really, it's really resonates with a lot of what the other remote companies, remote recruiters that we speak to as Grow Remote, they say a lot of that stuff. So really draw out your experience with any tech that you use, even if you think it's not that special. Often it can be, a real opener. So I want to say it's 5:00. I want to say thank you so much to Luke for being here, spending the hour with us. The feedback in the chat has been great. So, brilliant stuff. I will remind everyone that everyone who's registered will receive a follow-up email with the video, with the slides, and with other information and resources. So, you can go through that, pick out whatever you need, whatever you want to get back to us on. And please do get in touch if you have other questions that you really think you would need extra support on. That's what we're here for. Adele says, thanks, I learned a lot. Neha says, thanks. Justin says, very clear. Thank you. Nicholas says, thanks. Thanks, Sinead. Yeah, so people are finding it useful. Really appreciate you coming along today. And again, just want to say thank you to Erica for making it all happen behind the scenes. Thank you, Erica. And have a beautiful evening, everyone. It's 5:01, so we'll let you go. And please do keep in touch with Grow Remote, and we'll see how we can help you out. Thanks again, Luke.
Thanks, folks. Have a great one.
Have a good one, guys. See you, folks. Bye.